Welcome to the Carpenter Performing Arts Center right here at Cal State University, Long Beach.
And welcome to the season finale of our second season of Unheard L.A. I'm Ashley Alvarado, Director of Community Engagement for KPCC.
And I'm John Cohn, Managing Producer of KPCC In Person. How many of you are KPCC listeners? Thank you so much for listening.
Let's keep this going. How many of you are attending a KPCC event for the first time?
We're here because Southern California is full of untold stories, but even more that go unheard. So
we launched Unheard L.A. last spring to help change that. It started with an invitation to you, our fellow Angelenos, to share your authentic first-person experiences of life in Southern California. And thanks to the overwhelming support we've received, we returned this year with more Unheard L.A., Real People Amplified.
Each show is unique because of who's involved and where we are. Some of our folks, they're experienced storytellers. Many are not, and for some, this is their first time on stage or speaking in public. Let's give it up for them. KPCC is a non-advocacy, nonpartisan media organization, and tonight's show, you've heard that before, tonight's show is reflective of the range of voices, experiences, and perspectives of those involved. Together, we explore our region one story at a time.
Now, none of this would be possible without the California Wellness Foundation and California Humanities, a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you for supporting this project. That was a mouthful. This is our final show of the season, but you can keep an eye out for next season and learn more about how you can get involved by going to kpcc.org/unheardla.
And just to keep the gratitude going, one of the things, we travel to a lot of different shows. This is the 9th Unheard L.A. show. This is the 9th different theater that we've been in as part of this project. And we just got to say, the people behind the scenes, the production teams at these theaters make a lot of what we do possible. And we have to say that through all of this project, tonight's crew at the Carpenter is top-notch and one of the best. So much gratitude to them tonight.
We're always looking to grow our Unheard L.A. family, and we invite you to engage with us on social media using the hashtag UnheardLA. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at KPCC In Person.
Enough of us. No show would be complete without a host, so please join me in welcoming Native Angelino, Artistic Director of Watts Village, Associate Artistic Director with Cornerstone Theater Company, and your Unheard L.A. host, Bruce Lemon.
Oh, yeah. Look at all this. Welcome to Unheard L.A., live from Long Beach. I am Bruce Lemon. I am your host. This is our Season 2 finale, and it is so great to see this huge theater packed to the gills for our Season 2 finale. Give it up to yourself. Thank you. Wow. 2 years. 2 years, 9 events. I say events rather than shows because this has been a huge life event for myself and many of the people that have been involved in this project. So thank you for your stories and for the experience of listening to others. Anybody here for your first Unheard L.A.? Well, nice. Welcome to the family. How about any regulars? Who's been here before? Okay. All right, now this is my favorite part. All right, on the count of 3, everybody rep your city. Just shout it out. Rep your city. 1, 2, 3. Ooh. Okay, who's from Long Beach? Yeah. With so much drama in the LBC, it's really fun being Bruce, your Unheard MC, and we somehow, some way, keep coming up with funky LA stories like every single day. Woo. Yeah, you know. Can't come to Long Beach without paying respect to the dog father, you know? Now, back in the day when I was a terrible person pirating music, like I know nobody else in here did in the early 2000s, one of the few artists I would always legally purchase was Snoop Dogg. You gotta give it up to the hometown heroes. And through hip hop, he showed me one of the first storytelling methods I would attempt to master throughout the years. Oh yes, I was a rapper in high school. We'd write our bars on notes and pass them through class like love notes. It was crazy. Good times. See, rap is poetry, and poetry is storytelling. We have a few poets in our lineup today, so kicking us off, This one you might remember from a previous Unheard L.A. show. He was born here, and since then he spread his word all over the world. Please welcome your hometown kid. Here to kick us off, Mike Songson.
Long Beach. Hey, it's really fantastic to be here. I was born up the street at St. Mary's Hospital, and my parents went to Long Beach State, so I'm very happy to be here today. The 562 is a nexus, a suburban-urban cross-section, a small-town, big city, affluent yet gritty. The 562 is somewhere between Hollywood and Irvine, Santa Monica and Anaheim. The 562 is a good time because its people are down to earth, blessed by birth to be born where the vibes are warm. Catch that cool ocean breeze blowing in from the beach. And the clouds, they come from the south as the coast winds around the peninsula of Palos Verdes. The temperature is perfect. This land was once marshlands and willow thickets intercepted by the LA River, but now surfers and grandparents kick it. The 562 is all-American, multicultural, folks from Iowa to Cambodia, El Salvador to Ethiopia, aviation Okies in the aerospace industry, and denizens of Long Beach Groove to Snoop Dogg and Sublime, garage rock and freestyle rhyme. And on the streets of Long Beach, you can find oil and Signal Hill, Broadway's alternative lifestyles, art in the East Village, downtown lofts and rockabilly chillers. And how many poly players are in the NFL? From JoJo's to the Prospect or Cohiba to the Blue Cafe, drinking sangria on a hot day, the bar flights cruise from the 49er to Belmont Shore, Ferns to the V-Room. And private parties used to get loose at the Spruce Goose. Anybody ever been to those? The 562 is a window into the future of lots of history, like the powerful earthquake of '33. The Pike used to be the place to be. And can we salute Cameron Diaz and her flavorful family? Respect to Lakewood, Cerritos, Bellflower, Paramount Downey, Hawaiian Gardens, Whittier, Norwalk, Cudahy, Southgate, Compton, to damn near Bell Gardens. Not to be confused with the 310. This is the 562 in the middle of SoCal, but its own little world. It's another beautiful day in El Dorado Park. In the place of my birth and in the home of my heart, this is the 562. Thank you.
There are many lenses of what you can see a place. One thing I like to do when I'm in a new city is take a midnight bike ride. The streets are empty and the city is mine. You can see all the bones of a community waiting for the people that inhabit it to keep it moving. Here to share what she's seen, please welcome Jenny Jacobs.
I have a confession to make. I love to rollerblade. I should clarify, I love to rollerblade while wearing a fanny pack and aerobic wrist weights. More specifically, I love to rollerblade while wearing my fanny pack and my wrist weights and listening to Barbra Streisand and Judy Garland songs. Wow, my people. All right. Barbra and Judy are the perfect companions for my 10-mile round-trip journey on the San Gabriel River Bikeway. Forgot about that visor, too. For anyone who doesn't know, this bikeway is part of a 38-mile trail that sits atop the eastern bank of the river, which runs parallel to the 605 freeway from the San Gabriel Mountains all the way to the Pacific Ocean. If you're envisioning a river like the Mississippi or the Colorado, you know where I'm going. Know that it's really just a 200-foot wide cement canal with cement walls that slope down to a cement floor with a tiny stream of water flowing down the middle. I pick up the trail in El Dorado Park, where I start my playlist and find my stride as the orchestra builds to the lyrics, clang, clang, clang went the trolley. And the energy from one of Judy's most iconic songs propels me forward. After a mile and a half, the San Gabriel River merges with Coyote Creek, and the cement becomes a rock-lined riverbank with trees, flowering bushes, tall grass, and a muddy, sandy riverbed holding blue-green water that fills the entire width of what is now truly a river. One that is alive with dragonflies, lizards, birds, fish, sea turtles, even seals. It's thrilling to feel the wind in my face and the sun on my shoulders and my body pushing and stretching through each stride while listening to music that I've loved for as long as I can remember. It's easy to get distracted here, but it's critical to stay alert to hazards along the way, like freeway underpasses that require graceless roller climbing and vigorous arm swinging to get to the other side. Or onshore breezes that become a brutal afternoon headwind that will roll you backwards if you pause to catch your breath. Or cyclists. The folks with the jerseys and the fancy bikes and the high-tech helmets who ride in herds and pass slower riders or rollerbladers by inching around my left shoulder and then cutting back into the lane with barely enough room between my leg and their back tire. And at the moment when I think I'm about to get knocked off the path by a passive-aggressive reminder that I'm in the way of their speed and stamina, I hear Barbara's voice boldly declaring, "Don't bring around a cloud to rain on my parade." The last hazard for me is one of the heart: homelessness. I grew up here, so I know that the bikeway has long been a home to those who don't have houses. And the heartbreaking reality is that this population is still growing. But I've seen reasons to hope. One morning, a couple years ago, the path was shockingly empty, except for one guy on a bike loaded with bags and boxes. Turned out, he was delivering pizza, oranges, and water to those few who live along the bikeway. And it wasn't until I saw him that I realized what day it was, and I heard Judy singing, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." That human kindness and generosity continues to remind me that beauty can be found just about anywhere if you're willing to look carefully. Just like the bikeway is filled with breathtaking moments of wildlife and nature, despite being nestled in this packed suburban setting. After 4 miles of river, wildlife, the Haynes Power Plant, and occasional hazards, the path in the river curves south, where the pavement becomes more worn and weathered, complete with treacherous potholes and salty sea air pushing against you. After the hardest part of the whole journey is complete, the path ends. The beach begins, and the river meets the Pacific. From this point, I can see the entire Long Beach coastline, from the tip of the peninsula to the shores of San Pedro. I can see Catalina and Signal Hill, the mountains, and the ocean stretching out far beyond where rollerblades can go. And I can't help but hear the violins swelling for Barbara's rendition of "On a Clear Day You Can See Forever," when she sings, "You'll feel part of every mountain, sea, and shore." And I'm looking around and taking it all in, thinking, Long Beach is surrounded by so much beauty and filled with something really special. Something unpredictable and seemingly incongruous, like a sea turtle playing in water flows from the power plant, or me huffing and puffing my way up an incline while Judy lilts in my ears, or pizza and oranges left next to a tent by a river on Christmas Day. There's room for all of it here. And despite what some cyclists might think, there's room for all of us here. All of us. The best part of this moment is that it's just the halfway point. Getting to the ocean means it's time to turn around and head home. thinking about all the different stories for every person, every dragonfly, bridge, or leaf that I pass, and listening to the music I know and love with all my heart. Yes, I love to rollerblade.
Anyone who's been following Unheard L.A. knows that my mom is most definitely in here right now. She comes to every show, right, Tracy? Yeah, there she is. See, that's what moms do. They're always there, always supporting, always growing things, people, pride, plants, showering you with love until bloom. Here to share, please welcome Ernesto Rocha.
For as long as I can remember, my mom has had plantitas stored in all the corners of her kitchen and growing everywhere outside our house. Stored deep in her cabinets are Ziploc bags filled with hierbabuena, albahaca, rosemary, hoja de manso, and ruda. Her magical plants will cure anything and everything that you can think of. Got a headache? My mom's got you with her famous ruda teas. She will place your head over the boiling tea leaves and ask you to inhale their curative steam. Need to boost up your immunity? No worries. She's got cedron teas ready on deck for your consumption. Got some pain on those knees? Nothing's better for that than rosemary and cedron ointment. But her magical powers extend outside of the kitchen and into her garden. She has always made her own makeshift garden out of anything that she can find around the house. No coffee can, pot, or box is safe around my mom. Where she finds land, she grows life. Currently, she is growing an abundance of hierbabuena, aloe vera, romero, albahaca, oregano, and other flowers and succulents. Her flowers and herbs have taken over the space of our garden complex, so much so that she has to gift them to her neighbors, saying, well, everybody has to have some romero and sábila. My ama can make any plant that you buy at the 99-cent store flower. Trust me, she's done it before. With her powerful incantations, she triaged a withered, rose-colored plant and made it flower for years. Pobrecita, pero ya verás cómo creces. Poor little plant, but you'll see. You'll grow. Call it a miracle, a green thumb, or Mexican mama magic. But the plant is still alive and thriving. Just the other day, she showed it to me. Now, the size of a melon, she nonchalantly said, Mira, todavía está viva. It's still alive. Now she's showing off. It's no surprise that my mother is an expert in all things plantitas. She comes from a long lineage of indentured farmers from the state of Jalisco, Mexico. From a young age, she was taught by her father to grow beans, squash, and corn. Everything they grew, they ate or they used to treat illnesses. As indentured farmers, they constantly migrated from place to grow their food and make their living. As she recalls, they migrated from the deep red lands of Jalisco to the borderlands of Sonora, seeking work and refuge. This was the first time she heard about El Norte. They never quite made it to the U.S., but the curiosity of El Norte stuck and took hold in my mom's heart. She grew up in pueblos with nothing more than their will to live and the magic in their hands. Her family would eventually return to Tepatitlan, the city that saw her grow into adulthood, marry, and start a family of her own. In 1990, my mother became a single mother of 6 children. My father died quite unexpectedly from an aggressive form of leukemia. Left alone with a young family, my mother did her best to stay afloat. She worked with her hands mostly, by learning how to sew. She was one of the best and fastest seamstresses in our town. There was no other person in our hood that was as fly as my mom in the overlock stitch. As a child, I grew up watching her and growing to her factory because she was talented. She would wipe off the sweat from her brow, take sips of coffee, and vroom, vroom. Those pieces of fabric never stood a chance. Before you knew it, blue uniform pants with the white strap down the sides were fully formed. No matter how many pants she sewed, the poverty we experienced became too powerful to keep us rooted. After years of struggling to feed us, my mother finally made the decision to immigrate to the US. What was once a curiosity for her as a child became a necessity for her as an adult. I was 8 years old when my brothers and I immigrated to Long Beach. Our journey brought us closer with my 3 sisters who were already living here. We didn't bring much with us except the essentials. We brought some clothes, family pictures, our giant Spanish Bible, and my mom's cooking comal. After all, how was Ama gonna cook and make her special home remedies? With nothing more than the will to live and the magic in her hands, my mother raised us here. Much like in Mexico, she raised us by using her hands in metalwork, laundry service, cleaning homes, and rearing other children. Little by little, she began anew and sought those things that were always familiar to her, mainly the land, her hands, and her magic. Her plantitas followed her to this land. Rosemary, aloe vera, ruda became her faithful companions from 20th and Baltic to 34th and Gale Street. We were raised in West Long Beach, amidst the pollution of the ports, the sound of gunshots, wailing sirens, and the never-ending traffic of the 710. Mom is my doctor and healer. All through high school and college, she prepared her special stress reliever teas. She was always worried about my health. Mijo, drink this tea. You're thinking too much. You're gonna end up bald or crazy. Well, as you can see, she did her best with her remedies. Her teas, her caldo de pollo with rosemary, ointments for the cuts and the bruises, and her pozole saved me through the heartaches of going through college while being undocumented. My mother raised us like she grows her plantitas, with a strong sense of faith, patience, and profound love. She raised us like she grows her calla lilies, that year after year bloom fervently. We too grow and give deep gratitude to the hands that provide guidance and care even to this day. With her magical hands, she has planted us here on solid ground, waiting, hoping to one day harvest on the curative flowers of her plantitas.
Change is a force. It's coming for us in the world we inhabit, in the layout of our cities, and more importantly, in our individual lives. Sometimes it takes a movement, but it always starts with you. Here to share his moment, please welcome Eugene Hong.
When I was a kid, I dreamed of being the Chinese American Billy Graham. As a grown-up, I gave my life to my calling of ministry. For more than 12 years, I served as an evangelical Christian pastor. Along the way, I gave hundreds of sermons and addressed every significant aspect of human experience. Time and again, I came back to what I believed were the most relevant issues of the day. But in those 12 years, I preached only once about sexual assault and rape. Just once. And even then, it was just an aside. It was one paragraph out of 5 pages of a sermon that was focused on something else. It wasn't for lack of material. The Christian Bible has several accounts of sexual violence and even prescribes punishments for such acts. So it's not like God ignores the topic. But for the most part, I did. It is one of my greatest regrets about my time as a clergyman. Speaking about it didn't fit my idea of being a preacher back then. Nope. My mental image of a preacher was formed decades earlier. In 5th grade, my parents took me to an open-air stadium where thousands of people came to hear the Reverend Billy Graham. He was an internationally known preacher who spoke to people's deep longings. He did it with a clear voice, a message of a loving God, and a warm sense of humor. I wanted to be just like him. Over the years, I heard Billy Graham speak many times, in person and via broadcast, but I never heard him talk about sexual assault or rape. Maybe he did on other occasions, but I never heard him address it. No one else preached about it either, so neither did I. You'll understand why it then surprises a lot of folks that since I left my last pastorate 7 years ago, I've worked mostly in advocacy for women's rights and the prevention of sexual violence. I even have a blog, Feminist Asian Dad. When I launched it, longtime friends asked whether it was a joke. It's definitely not. But to be completely honest, I myself am still kind of surprised at the change in my life. It didn't happen all overnight. It really began when my older daughter was born in 2006, with my second one arriving a few years later. I was still serving as a minister then, but that's when I began to consider what my daughters would be going up against in this world. By the time I left the ministry a few years later, I had started to see things really through my daughter's eyes. One day, one of my girls told my wife and me she needed to wear skinny jeans because they're better. Later that year, she asked us for the first time, "Am I fat?" She was 6 years old. I began to connect online with body image activists around the world. I read their blogs and listened to their conversations as they called out the objectification of girls and women. They then connected me to a broad spectrum of women's rights activists. I watched their documentaries and attended their conferences, and before long, where I once was blind, I could now see that there are really so many ways that our society pushes women and girls down. Of course, that's not news to women, but it still feels like breaking news for most of us men, as it was for me. I wish it hadn't taken becoming a dad to daughters for me to start to get it, but that was the beginning of my new calling as an advocate for women and girls. As a pastor, I really didn't get how horrifically common sexual violence was. I did once I began working for a nonprofit mobilizing men and boys to advocate for women and girls. During those couple of years, I heard many survivors' stories, and I became well acquainted with the truly terrible statistics. The most shattering stat to me is that nearly 44% of all women in the United States have experienced sexual violence in their lifetimes. That means that as a pastor, I was undoubtedly preaching to many more survivors than I'd realized. It wasn't something that happened to just a few of my parishioners. It was widespread. It was an epidemic. It needed to be addressed from the pulpit, not just in counseling sessions with individual church members. And I didn't do it, except that one time. I spent more than 12 years of my life trying my best to be a Chinese-American Billy Graham. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be a strong ally for women and girls, and not just mine, but all. I will give my everything to be a feminist Asian dad.
As a child of Watts, I can tell you this. Even when there were helicopters hovering over our home or sirens drowning out Saturday morning cartoons, kids are still kids. Here to share a bit of her childhood, please welcome October Blue.
I would have never considered us homeless or squatters, but we were. My family lived in an abandoned apartment complex. Squatter, a term I didn't learn until my 20s. Mama would spend all day telling me how I would have my own bed, my own room, toys and all. I spent most of my childhood holding on to these fantasies. I grew up thinking I was living this narrow experience, when the reality is, most are one paycheck away from the streets. I grew up believing the stars shined brighter in my East Side realities than they did in others' West Side dreams. Vision kind of hazy, peering through gun smoke and weed chokes, I was born an urban baby. Similac first meal seeming to lack for nothing, yet everything at the same time. My block seemed long during my short-legged days. Had no shame busting out my $5 book of food stamps when the donut truck hit the block. Back doors open, drawers pulled out, one glazed twist, one old-fashioned, and a few extra donut holes I bought as payment. I had to get the best girls to turn the double dutch. Before the street lights came on, hit the corner store for a RC Cola, pack of Now and Laters, watermelon flavor, and a note from my auntie. This is Miss Jackie. Send a soft pack of Benson & Hedges menthols with my niece. Still had enough change for a giant, icy cherry flavored, blackberry clearly Canadian, and a pack of salty plums with $5 I rained on my block. Friday nights, headed to the high school, navigating past the dog-guarded unlocked gates, a East Side safari. Making it just in time to be hit by the sweet, funky scent of elotes. $1 gets you the works. Parmesan, paprika, butter, lime, and mayonnaise. And we never questioned the mayonnaise. Saturday morning, a loud but distant sound, a squeeze horn, and an off-key soprano, tamales! My alarm clock. Rushed out the door, sliding in my house shoes because I didn't wear slippers until my adult years. One effortless motion, dressed and out the door, snatching up the last 2 queso tamales out of the black trash bag-lined pots. No champorado. I preferred Carnation's instant cocoa. Somehow I always forgot the salsa, rushing to get back to the house because cheap meals and morning smokes brought the cute boys out. Messy head, forgotten scarf, and I didn't want my neighbors to clown. I grew up seeing the stars shined brighter in my East Side realities because they did. It was family, revolt, backyard gardens, unrest, Bloods and Crips, 2.25 miles in total, and I cherished my small part of it between Hooper and Naomi.
Let's be honest. Long Beach is essentially a mini California. I mean, there's everything here. You got industry, beaches, hospital, a college, and a university. Its own public transit system, its own airport, Her Royal Highness the Queen Mary, which is definitely haunted. A battleship and an aquarium with your very own whale. The city also has a rich and nuanced history that has attracted people from all walks of life and all over the globe. Heck, you even hosted some of the Olympic events back in the year 1984, also known as the glorious year in which Bruce Lemon was born. So rich is the history of Long Beach that they've identified 17 historic districts within the city. Here to share some of that history is the 3-term Long Beach Heritage President, Stanley O.
In 1887, on a windswept plain by the edge of the ocean-fronted bluffs, the city of Long Beach was created by Jotham Bixby and William Wilmore. The Rancho Los Cerritos, which was owned by Jotham Bixby, was reinvented to Iowa to populate the village. The Bixby's turned to the Midwest, primarily to Iowa. The immigrants were anxious to relocate because most of the land in Iowa had been owned by the end of the Civil War. The California Immigration Society approached established Methodist congregations who relocated to Long Beach. This curious happenstance resulted in the popular moniker for the city, Iowa by the Sea. Now you know where they got the name. It virtually was Iowa by the Sea, and Jotham Bixby. Jotham Bixby's cousin John Bixby, who owned the other rancho to the east, Rancho Los Alamitos, further developed a large addition in 1886 called Alamitos Beach Town Site to annex to the city of Long Beach. The Bixby name is ubiquitous in the city. Henry Huntington, yes, that Huntington, created an interurban trolley system all over the Southland. The first route to be developed in 1902 was from Los Angeles to Long Beach. It was wildly successful. Its first run was on the 4th of July, 1902, and so many tourists came to town that they couldn't take people back to Los Angeles that evening. The result was that hundreds of people had to sleep on the beach and never left. Mr. Huntington purchased all of the land on Alamitos Bay. Then he could continue the trolley line to Huntington Beach and eventually to Newport Beach. In concert with the train lines, the lands were developed. Mr. Huntington had the effrontery to develop not as a prudish community as the Methodists would have hoped, but to create an exotic fantasy land. Canals were dug, 6 palaces were built on the sand, and it was called Naples. With an aggressive sales force, a trolley to reach potential buyers, and the Italian theme with its own force of Italian gondoliers, Huntington's dream came to fruition. An enormous hotel was built by Elmira Hershey, who also owned the Hollywood Hotel. Sales in the project have continued to the present day with multi-million-dollar homes sitting in the midst of a friendly, convivial community. Naples Island here in Long Beach continues to be a vibrant part of the patchwork in one of the largest cities in California. In 1921, oil discoveries on Signal Hill created a population boom, which resulted in a building boom. Hundreds of residential and commercial structures were built, many of which have survived through the efforts of Long Beach Heritage, as well as 17 historic districts, and Victorian mansions that have been restored and open to the public, as well as the adobe ranchos from the history. The Bixbys and Huntington left indelible marks on the history of Southern California, and especially Long Beach. And it's Long Beach's history is particular that I have striven to document with the Long Beach Heritage Society. Innovation built this city, and I am very grateful to be a part of sharing that history.
If we've demonstrated anything tonight, it's that cities are much more than what shows up on a map. They are shaped by community with intersections of culture and language and stories. Cities are the people and the journeys that populate them and the memories that stay with them. Here to tell us more, please welcome Vicki Whipple.
Long Beach is my mom's city. We weren't raised in Long Beach, but 9 miles and several light years away in Huntington Beach, the suburb of my youth. My mom never fit in Orange County, itched under her own skin. And so she moved to Long Beach after I left for college, a time when I felt more comfortable with boring than I did the urban unknown. And that's what Long Beach felt like to me back then. An urban unknown that had birthed Snoop Dogg and Sublime. I wondered, what had my mom gotten herself into this time? But then I came here with friends from tonier hometowns with fancy names like Lake Oswego and Carmel by the Sea, who drove home with me for spring break. I cried silently as we exited the 405 off Cherry. But then I gasped as we pulled up to her new apartment, with ocean breezes and port views just across from the Long Beach Art Museum. Maybe this would be okay. The apartment itself was a 100-year-old fourplex with an original stove and bathroom fixtures. I don't remember the clawfoot tub, though charming, draining very well. For my mom, it was love at first sight. But for me, well, it would take a few more dates. Progressive, artsy, sun-loving, dirty fingernails, sometimes awkward, but smart. Smartest person in the room smart. That's Long Beach. And my mom. She simply loved this city, all of it. Its beauty, the street art, exposed poverty, social justice, the unabashed liberalism, and the beaches that, though awesome, don't often grace the cover of Sunset magazine. I got a new job 6 weeks after Mom died. My new office is at the heart of downtown Long Beach, with the same ocean views as her first apartment almost 20 years ago. She actually got me the job from her deathbed. That's a whole nother story. But each morning, I commute past the condo she ended up in. At lunch, I take my mandated 30 minutes and meander about her old neighborhood, passing scenes she would have excitedly reported back to me just a few short months ago on her own walks about. I see where her old antique shop was, Tubies on Broadway, where she connected with a motley crew of other drifters, dealt in tall tales and good old-fashioned bartering, while swapping other people's dusty cast-offs. She would hold court in that shop, serving $2 chuck out of wine glasses right off the shelf. The tags were still attached because heaven knows that the inventory was still for sale. She can't really be gone because I see her everywhere here. Like when I walk by the homeless center where she volunteered, shoulder to shoulder with ex-convicts participating in a work release program. She loved connecting with them and telling them that she too had been arrested. Truth be told, it was a littering case, but she was assigned freeway cleanup nonetheless. Like everyone else, the ex-convicts loved her. I see her in the arts district, in the Art Deco architecture that made her giggle. In the Catalina tile outlining the Spanish stucco, she always stopped to admire. And my God, do I see her in the street art. That lady never saw a mural she didn't love. Every spray-painted underpass or alley was better than the Louvre in her eyes. I even see her at the Rite Aid near Bluff Park, the halfway point of her daily walk, where, on hot days, she treated herself to a single scoop cone for the return trip home. This place put a smile on her face before it grew up to be the town so many of us are proud of. She was practically deaf, so the occasional gunshot or car backfire didn't bother her. Neither did the scream of the ambulance from the 3rd Street fire station just down from her place. But she loved the skateboarders rolling by at all hours and the Cal State students buying coffee from shops she deemed too expensive. I grieve for her every minute. But I also thank her. She shared Long Beach with me. And guess what? I fell in love too. She gave me my adopted hometown and gave her grandkids the place where they're growing up, playing Little League, splashing through beach days, and making their childhood best friends. Amidst the shock of her stage 4 cancer diagnosis about 2 years ago, I got into Mom's hospital bed, ducking through the monitors and cords. I found her small frame, and I held her. This was a disconcerting move for both of us, because my mom didn't do cuddling. But in that embrace, and my own out-of-body experience, I told her, "Mom, you can haunt me." I will take you in any form, even after you die. I'd prefer you not to be a scary ghost, but even that's okay. Please, just don't leave me. And now, in these months that she's been gone, I see it. She is haunting me. The good kind, not the scary kind. Through this city, Long Beach is her ghost. It's where she left her mark, and it's the place that left the biggest mark on her. I'm so grateful for the sunrises, pocket parks, the cityscape, graffiti, patio restaurants, the beach path, and yes, the street art. Each one giving moments of the day to be with her. So I love this town for at least 100 reasons of my own. But now, I also love it because it keeps my mom alive for me.
I ran a 5K yesterday. It's not a marathon. No. See, a marathon is 26.2 miles, and that .2 counts. It's tough, but you can do it, especially if you have our next storyteller by your side. Please welcome Sheldon Wright.
May 25th, 2009. It was my best marathon. I had just run the Pasadena Marathon in March and had achieved my personal record of 5 hours, 17 minutes. So, I was shooting to improve on that time, maybe even dipping under 5 hours in the LA Marathon. It began at the expo in the convention center on Saturday, the day before the race. I wore my LA Marathon shirt from 1991. That had been my first run. I picked up my bib and goodie bag, and then I drove the course to get a feel for things. The course had changed again, and that night, I couldn't sleep, naturally. Sunday on race day, the weather was perfect. Overcast. Just the way I like it. I started off good and ran without issues for most of the race. I was on pace for about a 5:10 for several miles. I decided to give high fives to as many kids who had their hands out. The kids and their parents liked it, but not as much as me. I love connections, and I was in a zone. As I went along, I told legacy runners congratulations. Legacy runners are those people who have run the LA Marathon every year since it began in 1986. I saw many people who, like me, had a message on their shirts about their late mothers. I was really enjoying the community, but the best was yet to come. Around mile 19, I saw a young man who was laboring and had slowed down to a very slow walk. As I jogged past him, I told him to run through the pain and to not let it stop him. He said thank you and began running again. Now, I usually don't do that, give people advice. I prefer to keep to myself on stuff like that. I may say hang in there or good job when someone says it to me first, but not much more. But this situation was different because I had been working with my son, who was 10 years old at the time, to get his 1 mile run under 11 minutes at school. This young man reminded me of my son. I saw him again at mile 21. I was still on pace for a bit over a 5-hour run. At this point, I was resigned to not breaking the 5-hour barrier. Next time, I thought, something to shoot for next time. He was laboring again, so I decided to take him under my wing. We ran together for about 4 miles. His name was Andrew. He told me he was 23. It was his first run. I talked him through the pain. I asked him if he believed in God. He said yes. And I said it was a good time to pray. At drink stations, I splashed his head and face with water. I told him a few jokes. He didn't laugh. I ran backwards in front of him. When he stopped, I ran back and got him going again. His eyes said, "Go away." But his mouth said, "Don't stop helping me." So, I followed orders. It was then that I realized I wasn't even going to match my Pasadena time. But it didn't matter as much to me anymore. I felt like I had a bigger purpose. This was my 6th marathon, and it was shaping up to be a run like no other. Toward the last mile or so, the surge of people trying to finish caused me to lose my new friend in the crowd. And since I was beginning to cramp up, my plan was to get to the finish line, wait for him, and then yell at him to finish. I came in at 5:20. I was fine with that time. Whatever. I got my medal, and then I immediately turned around, but I didn't have to yell because he was right behind me. He was smiling. He said thank you over and over again. We hugged. I told him if he ran next year to help somebody else through. He promised. And as it turned out, things worked out better for me than I expected. The next day, I checked the marathon website and found out that they had adjusted my time down to 5:16.38. So, I helped out someone, and I got my personal record too. Like I said, it was my best marathon.
You, yes, you, human, you are capable of amazing things. Going to space, climbing mountains, sharing your story, saving lives. Compassion, love, and all the good stuff we need. Here to share some of that, please welcome to the stage, Chrissy Gabata.
I have been living and breathing pre-leukemia, bone marrow failure, and sickness and disease, an unknown future for the last 10 years, and it's now finally over. It's not to say that I walked around in some depressed state all the time, quite the opposite. I didn't feel sick, I didn't look sick. It was quite easy to ignore the pending doom of my disease, but it was always there in the back of my mind, kind of like an itch you can't scratch or a sense you can't shake. When you're diagnosed with a fatal disease, you have two options, really. The first is to give up. The second is to fight, or move forward at least. I chose the latter because I have one of the most incredible support systems anyone could ask for. An incredibly close-knit, loving, caring, and many times completely nuts family and group of friends. And these people, let me tell you, they are a force to be reckoned with. When they need to rally, they rally in the biggest of ways. The minute I was diagnosed, there was no time for tears or the what-if scenarios. It was, okay, what do we need to do? Where do we need to go? We need total strangers to sign up and register to become bone marrow donors? Okay, we're on it. We spent the first several years learning all we could about what it meant to be a bone marrow donor, why my mixed race heritage was such a complication in finding a match, and how this transplant was going to be my cure. It got to the point where my boyfriend and I would be out to dinner and we'd see someone who is half Asian and half white. It's a term called hapa, if you don't know. And we'd just stare at them. Have you ever caught yourself staring at someone to the point where you actually have to then go up and explain yourself? Well, let me tell you, it's a very effective way to get someone to sign up as a bone marrow donor. Over the first few years, thousands of people registered. My family and friends were constantly going out to get more people registered, but my match just didn't come until 2011. It was about 3 years into my diagnosis, and we got a hit. There was a woman somewhere, you aren't allowed to know details, who was a 9 out of 10 match for me, and my doctor just kind of glazed over it. I stopped her and had to look back at the screen and said, Doc, is that what I think it is? Oh, yeah, good, right? I had been spent years waiting for this moment. The elation of finding someone, and then the relief, and then the devastation. My doctor and I spoke about this person, my savior-to-be, and it was decided that she had one major mismatch that the doctors all felt was just too risky to move forward with. Mind you, this is about 7 years ago, and medicine changes all the time. But after being T-boned with the news of the disease, the shock of 3 years later, finding just one person in the whole world who kind of matched me, but not good enough, it was like hitting rock bottom all over again. I went back into denial for 7 years. In the beginning, it was easy to get back to life, to keep doing what I was doing, but slowly I developed a sense in my heart and grew more convinced things weren't going to work out if I stuck to the status quo. I'd regularly have thoughts of my own funeral, not really be able to plan far in the future because I didn't know if I had one. And then last summer, I physically felt things starting to decline. I'd had such a good 10-year run that when my blood counts started dropping, even my doctors were hesitant to acknowledge how urgent the need for the transplant was. But again, what were my options? I needed a bone marrow transplant. A lot had changed in the 7 years since my hopes had been dashed. There was a new procedure that was having success. But what about the all-important donor? Would you believe that that same woman from 7 years ago was still hanging around for me? As much as it scared me to embark on what I knew was going to be a very difficult physical process with chemo and radiation, more chemo, drugs, weakness, dizziness, depression, chemo curls. This is not my natural color. I trusted my medical team, my family, and my friends. And I knew it was now or never. 10 years in the making, all of a sudden, this chapter of my life was closing and a new one was beginning. My donor, whom I won't meet until the 1-year anniversary of transplant, which is December 1st of this year, she did the most selfless thing anyone could do. She took time out of her day to get tested. She self-injected with a medicine to produce more blood, and she was hooked up to an IV for 4 to 6 hours so that I, someone she had never met, could receive her stem cells and live disease-free. It's incredible to think back on the last 10 years. All the ups and downs, all the normal things in life, all the abnormal things in life, a moment, really. And now, I can really say that that was a moment for me. I am free of MDS, no longer saddled with a life-threatening disease, and I can plan for the future, the long-term future. A moment is what I experienced, and one that I don't think I'd trade if I had the choice. In fact, I know I wouldn't. It taught me the greatest examples of love and compassion I've ever known, and for that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you.
Kids in LA grow up within earshot of really big dreams. Huge goals seemingly impossible to achieve. One thing's for sure though, if you don't use your voice, you'll miss that shot. Here to share his, please welcome Jason Barquero.
For as long as I can remember, I dreamed of becoming the next Vin Scully. It's a common enough dream, but one that felt audacious as a kid who grew up in Southeast LA, the child of immigrants, speaking Spanish at home, and fighting to convince the teachers I could succeed in English language classes. And while I didn't call this afternoon's Dodger game, which the Dodgers won today, by the way, 14-0, I have come a long way from my days as a 9-year-old boy doing play-by-play of bases loaded for my Nintendo. Here comes the 3-2 pitch. That's a high drive into deep left field. She is gone. But my journey is not one without a few detours. In 2009, I had the privilege to earn my graduate degree on this very campus. Go Beach. I proudly walked off the stage earning a master's degree in sports management. To be honest, like many of you, I didn't know what I would do with it. Now I know. 4 years ago, I was working in higher education when I saw an ad that the San Diego Padres were hosting open auditions for a stadium public address announcer. I had no intentions of moving to San Diego, but 2 of my good friends insisted I go, and they even offered to drive. We headed to San Diego one Saturday morning at 6 and got in line at Petco Park. So did 700 other people. Only 450 people were allowed to audition, and I was number 373. The wait was 7 hours long, but I finally got my shot. 60 seconds that could change my entire life, and there I was walking down a field-level aisle right behind the dugout. I was handed a script and given only a couple of minutes to rehearse in my head. Then it was my turn to walk up to a microphone stand much like this. And so I belted out, now batting, third baseman, Chase Headley. And to ensure them I could pronounce names in Espanol, Yasmani Grandal. I left that day with absolutely no expectations. But 2 weeks later, I found out I was one of 30 finalists to make it to the next round. Then I became one of 20. Contestants were assigned a Twitter hashtag, and it was up to us to get people to vote for us. Think popularity contest. That's when I realized how many people I had on my side. We were invited to announce a couple of innings of a preseason game, and a week after that, I was told I had made it to the top 10 and was invited to be the public address announcer for the first 5 innings of opening day at Petco Park. And as luck would have it, who would we play? The Dodgers. And yes, Vin Scully was sitting just a few booths away. Ultimately, I did not get the gig, but I did have a new direction. A Downey journalist who had covered my Padres experience sent me an announcement about the Lakers' minor league team, the Los Angeles Defenders, looking for a public address announcer. This time, the audition pool was smaller, about 75 to 100 candidates. And after a round of American Idol-style auditions, the pool narrowed to 7. And then I received an email that would forever change my life, an invitation to be the Defenders' public address announcer for the 2014-15 season. I was now a member of the Los Angeles Lakers organization. I couldn't believe it. This called for 24 home games, meeting potential young future NBA stars, and awesome Lakers holiday parties. They throw good parties. And this spring, just as I was about to finish my 4th season in the minor league team, the Lakers front office called me with a request I could not refuse. They asked whether I was ready to fill in at the big show, Staples Center. With only 24 hours to prepare, I walked into Staples Center on Easter Sunday to announce the team with 16 NBA championships, your Los Angeles Lakers. I'm guessing that's for the Lakers, not for me. There were 17,000 people in the audience. Among those cheering fans were my parents. They had seen me through everything, from my elementary school struggles to attending Cerritos Community College, where I had my very first radio show and my very first feeling of belonging. And they had been among the voices who encouraged me, like many first-generation college students, to get a real job. You see, my parents were among the reasons that for 13 years now, I had served students from across various colleges, providing them with career counseling, job opportunities, and most importantly, hope. And of course, my parents weren't just there with me at Staples. They've been there to see me with the Defenders, then with the Lakers, and finally, I'm happy to say that today, I am also the public address announcer for LA's newest professional soccer team, the LAFC. I'm hoping that one was for me. I've learned to embrace audacity, because when it came to the LAFC gig, there was no announcement, no job board. It was just me pestering the LAFC management and introducing myself, and eventually earning an opportunity to audition. As much as I love my role with the Los Angeles Lakers organization, this new opportunity has taught me so much and has been more exciting than I could have ever imagined. And of course, it's part of my ultimate plan that there will be no sporting event in LA where you won't hear me booming over your loudspeaker. I kid, of course, sort of. For now, I'll leave you all, like I do all fans after every match at Bank of California Stadium. I'm your stadium announcer, Jason Barquero. Have a good night, and please drive home safely.
And that's our show. We are here to explore SoCal one story at a time and to show the magic that happens when you stop and listen to one another. So now we want to hear from you. How'd you like tonight's show? Let us know by texting Unheard L.A. to 63735. Check the spelling. Don't let autocorrect get the best of you. Thank you to all the folks on the screen who helped make Unheard L.A. possible. Thank you to our growing Unheard L.A. family. The wonderful folks here at the Carpenter Performing Arts Center, the California Wellness Foundation, and California Humanities for supporting this project, which you can find out more about at kpcc.org/unheardla. And stay tuned for our next season. And once again, thank you for coming out and being a part of our season finale. If you want to know more about these people you just saw, then make sure you grab one of these printed programs. You can find it right outside as you head out to the mixer, which starts right now, where I encourage you to find someone new, tell them where you're from. But whatever you do, don't leave here tonight with your story unheard. Bless you. Good night.